people are mistaken in what they know. They thought they knew that the Battle of Hastings took place in 1067, but they were wrong. And, of course, we forgive them, so long as they admit that they're wrong. But is it possible that you're wrong about everything you know? Is it possible that reality is nothing like what you think? Suppose you've been lied to your entire life and did not have the capacity to know you'd been lied to. Suppose you're too stupid to ever know the truth. Against all religious, rational, and scientific claims to know the truth, skepticism generates questions that seek to create a space outside the limits of all positive assumptions. Skepticism is a school of thought that examines whether a person's knowledge and perceptions are actually true. Specifically, skepticism works within a philosophy known as epistemology, which explores the origins, nature, and limits of human knowledge. Skepticism takes many shapes, from Buddhism to the sophist, Marxism to postmodern thought. Because I can't focus on all of them, here I will focus specifically on what's known as logical skepticism, which forms the framework within which all skepticisms function. What is skepticism? It is not any particular philosophical position. In fact, it's perpetually anti-position by its very nature. Like a postmodernist on amphetamines, unable to construct a position, always in the dark, groping, skepticism is a mode of thought, of form. It is the capacity to always trace out the negative implicit in any view that anyone puts forth. It is contrarianism embodied. Skepticism is not taught in any public high school or in most colleges, and if it is very generic and very formal. My opinion is that this mode of thought known as skepticism, if it was taught to teenagers or to college students or even adults, it would become very dangerous to society because, as professional skeptics, they would locate and tear at the seams that construct the modern worldview. If everyone was a skeptic, they would question the assumptions of law, of schools, of parent-child relationships, of love, of justice, of the global market. In short, if everyone adopted the approach to life known as skepticism, then we'd be in a state of anarchy. And I don't think that's such a bad thing. Beginning here, I'd like to trace out the methods of skeptical thought, or at least hint at them, in a skeptical manner, of course. The first distinction I'd like to make is between two forms of skepticism. One form is known as hyperbolic skepticism, which is a word invented by Descartes, and this has a tendency to turn into a postmodern form of skepticism, which tends to be very nihilistic. On the other hand, there's a kind of skepticism that a lot of anarchists endorse, which is a very healthy kind of skepticism, which is not a claim that there are no truths, but that most of what we have been taught our entire lives is basically bullshit. First, I'm going to focus on the logical form of skepticism, which is rooted in Descartes and can be traced through Hegel, Wittgenstein, and modern logical thought. But keep in mind that later on I'd like to approach a more healthy form of skepticism. Before going any further into my discussion on Descartes, I'd like to add in my own personal opinion, which is that hyperbolic skepticism essentially reveals the limits of rational thought and opens the path to aesthetic thinking, to the acceptance of the embodiment of the human form and the restrictions of conceptual thought. I just thought that understanding my own position would help you understand my skepticism of skepticism itself and why I think it's limited. Descartes is the consummate modern skeptic, scared and obsessed with what we could know to be certain. Feeling daring in a world skeptical of the future, he decided to doubt everything that could be doubted, implying that whatever is left over must be certain. This skepticism is unhealthy, I think, because it is out of fear and obsession with the truth, rather than attempts to empower oneself. Descartes made thinking a form of doubting, thus bringing a relationship to the world in doubt, and this is why I'm against him. Here I should try to give the best argument for Descartes. I might think that I'm sitting here making a video, but how do I know this isn't a dream? I often have dreams where I'm making videos, so what makes me think that this isn't one? Might I be the victim of a machine found in the Matrix? How do I know I'm not hooked up to electrodes that make me feel I'm alive? Hell, maybe the whole world is an illusion. These are the kind of problems that Descartes invented through his form of skepticism. There's a problem known as the brain in the vat problem. This is the skeptical problem of, how do I know I even have a body? Maybe my whole body has been amputated, leaving only my brain. Maybe I have a phantom body. What kind of evidence do you have supporting the view that you're not a mere brain in an illusionary construct of a body? Suppose, like, a mad scientist cut your brain out and just feeds it nutrients to make it feel like it's alive. The philosopher Hilary Putnam asked these questions in his 1981 book, Reason, Truth, and History, which is a pretty good book, and it opens you up to these forms of doubting. Few people are likely to believe that they're a brain in a vat, but these kind of questions offer a view into philosophical skepticism. And these problems seem silly right here, but if you expand these problems to involve social problems and political problems, they begin to make a lot of sense. How do you know that other people have bodies? What kind of evidence do you have supporting that view? And even if they had bodies, that doesn't mean that they have minds. And if they have minds, what makes us think their minds are anything like ours? Might people be simply mindless autonoma, or might they be mere machines? Maybe I am the only one that's conscious, the only one that really exists here in the cosmos. Or maybe other people have minds that are different than mine. Maybe they're all aliens. The best exploration of this is in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Hamlet has this haunting sense that he's the only real person in a play where everyone else is acting, where everyone else has a part, where everyone else is not really alive, but is merely living out their part. What kind of feelings and meanings come from that? Children ask the question, how do I know that the colors you see are the same colors that I see in my mind? It seems silly, but this is actually dealing with the problem of subjective experience that skepticism takes us to. What does it mean to have separate subjective perceptions of the world that no one else has access to? Philosophy always takes us through these silly scenarios, and I bet you think that some of the questions I just asked were silly, but they're trying to pull us out of where we feel fine and comfortable, to leave us in a moment of suspense where we get a sudden sense of the unreality of reality. So again, I think it's worth pointing out that skepticism is not putting forth any point of view, but it is merely challenging any point of view that's put forth. And that's where these silly, skeptical questions come from. How can I be sure that there's such thing as the future? How do I know the future will resemble the past in any way? Just because the past has always been a certain way, what makes us think the future will too? Just because some food has always nourished me, what makes me think it will in the future? How do I know the laws of gravity will always work in the future? Bertrand Russell pointed out the problem of how it is that we know that existence didn't just spring into existence a few moments ago, structured to make it feel as though there had been a past. This is the problem of inference. How do we justify the idea that there's a connection between the past and the future? And this is the fundamental tool of skepticism, which is an attack on cause and effect. Is there anything that you can be certain of? Descartes would argue that you can be certain of the fact that you are thinking right now. It is not certainty that you exist in the past or the future, or that you have a body, but there is something thinking right now. My skepticism of Descartes and contemporary doubting is that there's a strong connection between what he says and current ecological devastation. When you separate the person from the world, saying that he is a thinking thing with no certain connection to the world, then you're removing him from that world, which in effect alienates the person from the world, abstracting his or her thoughts from the environment, making it a lot easier to destroy the world. I'll talk about that later. So it's not hard to be a skeptic. If you want to be the ultimate skeptic, there are only two tools that you need. The first tool is that anytime anybody proposes anything, just attack their assumptions and keep questioning those assumptions. And no matter what they say, just attack those assumptions. The second tool is to attack the relationship between events. If they say that something happened and then something else happened, just attack the connection. This is a unique sophist tool that is used in different political arguments. The third tool of skepticism is the one that the sophist ultimately used on Plato. It's silence. Silence, the elimination of language from conceptual space, is the ultimate tool of skepticism, used by Zen Buddhist monks and Wittgenstein. It's the same tool I use on YouTube. When somebody posts an ignorant comment, I simply don't respond.